bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we go super deep. It's a deep dive into a topic that we have scratched the surface on a lot in the last, couple months on many different podcasts and with many different guests. But today I had the perfect guest to take a deep dive into artificial intelligence and the future of it. We discussed the pros and cons, how it's going to impact our lives, the net positives and net negatives. We look at artificial intelligence from a creative tool perspective, from a philosophy perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from a man versus machine, transhumanism perspective. So this is a very fascinating discussion because the truth is artificial intelligence isn't going to soon be here. It is here. And that's why I think this conversation, this podcast episode is so important because these are relevant topics and what I believe really important things to think about and discuss. I think in the intro, I've been so excited about this podcast that I have forgot to mention who my guest is today. And his name is Tsakiris. And you guys might know him because he's a regular on my roundtable panel show called The Union of the Unwanted. He's also a regular on the Ripple Effect podcast. He's been on quite a bit. I've also been on his podcast, and you can search for these episodes and much more at therippleeffectpodcast.com or just go in the show description to find links to my website and all my other work. On my website, I do have a search box, so you can put in Alex's name or any past guests like Scott Horton or James Corbett or Whitney Webb, anybody who's been on a bunch. If you want to go back in the archives and check out some old episodes with those guests, it's easily searchable on my website. And also on my website is ways of supporting the show. If you're a fan of the Ripple Effect podcast, please help support and grow the show. There's tons of ways to do so. You can rate, review, leave comments, help those algorithms favor shows that typically they're suppressing. But if you're in the holiday spirit and you're in a good financial situation, there's tons of ways you can donate to the show. We have a PayPal account. We have a Venmo account. You can support us monthly on Patreon. And thank you everyone who does. That's one of the best ways of supporting the show because it's monthly support I can count on. But other ways of supporting the show is also checking out our sponsors. Opus Clips is a powerful, possibly the most powerful AI podcast or video clip creator. You can add music to clips. It uses AI to create B-roll. It rates your clips based on its value or how likely it is to trend. In the show description and on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com, we also have links to other sponsors like the University of Reason, created by Richard Grove, and also the Scott Horton Academy, which is brand new. Definitely check that out. And then, of course, last but not least, check out my merch store at the Ripple Effect Podcast. Merch.com will be the URL that takes you directly there, and you can find those links on my website or in the show description. We got some awesome podcast merch and some amazing new artwork and designs that I think everyone will really like. And then we also have Theory 6 logos and designs and merch if you like the music. And everybody seems to really like the new single called Digital Disease about the exact topic we'll be discussing today, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and other related topics. You can find Theory 6 music anywhere you download or stream music. And I think that's it. Enjoy what I think is a important, relevant, and timely conversation about artificial intelligence. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
How you doing, man?
Good. Long time no talk.
I know.
It's funny because not every episode, but many of my recent episodes, the last month or so, AI has been a topic, it comes up. I just had a musician on. I actually just uploaded the new episode today. This band I grew up listening to, Still Remains, and we got into AI music and we got into and then I had Scott Horton on. We talked about AI in regards to geopolitics and AI in regards to like the future of the economy and those type of things. And it's like, dude, there's somebody I'm missing that I need to talk to because everybody I talk to about AI, it's amazing how some of these people have been like Scott, TJ from Still Remains. Like some of these people are kind of they haven't really thought about it that much. Like you could tell, like they just, and I'm just like stunned because I'm like, dude, the world is evolving and changing so quickly, and it might get you off guard because if you're not paying attention
Definitely.
to it or thinking about it or anything like that or using it to see what its capabilities are, um, you're gonna be shocked at some point.
Well, worse than shocked, you're just going to be left behind because there's a gap that's forming, and it's getting bigger every day. It's kind of like, people who were reluctant to use the internet, or learn the internet, or like your parents or grandparents who didn't want to get a cell phone, and wouldn't text, like, well, I'm holding out, it's like, okay, how did that work for you?
Yeah, it's weird. So I just started doing music again. I have a project called Theory Six, and I started releasing
Nice.
music again. And so I haven't released any music since the beginning of the podcast, basically, because the name of the podcast was named after a song called "The Ripple Effect." It's the theme. It ended up being the theme song to the podcast, and I was doing everything solo, so it would be super time consuming. I mean, by the time I'd write the lyrics, and lyrics could take counting on how it's flowing and how creative you're feeling when you're writing, and how things come together when you get that spark of inspiration. It could take weeks or it could take months. And then you have to put together like the structure of the song and the feel of the song and write some riffs, either on piano or guitar, and then build, the sound in your head of like trying to recreate what you're hearing in your head. And it just, you record the guitar, then this and then that, and then, I don't play drums, so I use drum machines and try to, just, I mean, you could spend hours and hours and hours just on a drum machine trying to create fills and all this stuff. And it was just like I just didn't have the time. And then with like kids and coaching and the podcast and trying to keep your marriage alive and all the other priorities you have in your life, I'm just like, dude, it has to take a back seat. And then one day I was thinking, I don't know if I listened to something, but something sparked the idea about AI music generators. And I don't know if you know, but like Suno, which is one of the music generators, is like a top five downloaded app in the world. It's like a
Right.
huge app. And so I was like online on my phone, and I'm like, let me see if I could punch in some like old lyrics I have and put in like the structure I want for the song and
Yeah.
some ideas and see what happens. I'm telling you, man, like I was just in line at school waiting for my kids to come out, and I was blown away. Like I was just like I'm like, "Oh my God. Like this is the song that was in my head." And
Yeah.
literally in minutes it just generated it. And I was like I was so shocked like how, and I'm a longtime musician. Like I expected some flaws. I expected a lack of creativity. I expected a lack of the ability to create what I was thinking. And I'm just like, I might never pick up an instrument ever again. It's just, it blew my mind. And then, so I've had this conversation with quite a few people about AI music, right? And I have a new song that is hopefully will be available. It's already released, but it takes a day or two before it's available on all the platforms. But this song called Digital Disease, which I released a little EP, but then I got some because I was just super excited about releasing music, so I released it, and then now I'm like taking a little bit more time to build these songs, and I have this song called Digital Disease, which is about AI consuming our lives. It's about the digital disease and how transhumanism and man versus machine and all these themes, and it's hilarious because I'm using AI to I used AI to create the song. So it's like I'm feeding the digital disease while writing about the dangers of it. And that song, hopefully by the time this podcast is out, will be available everywhere. But I've been having a bit of a debate with a few guests. I had a debate with Ryan from Last American Vagabond, right? Because he's a musician too. The singer still remains TJ. He's like, oh, he's like, oh, nothing against it, but he's like, I feel like you should. But and then, I always make the argument. I'm like, is it any different than the graphic designer using some software to create a perfect circle for a design, compared to the person who had to use a pencil? And it's like, so it's like or the DJ, right? Like you get Tiesto, you get Arvin van Buuren, you get all these guys. These guys don't play instruments. Dead Mouse, right? Like none of these guys play. They literally will just get samples. They'll input stuff. They have the creativity. They're just not actually physically playing the instrument, because technology now, you can create that song without having to play an instrument. So to me, like at first I'm like, dude, maybe like I do feel like I'm kind of cheating, but I'm like, they're my lyrics, they're my ideas, they're coming from my head. It's just taking less time to create the thing that I wanted. So it's like I'm in this like, and as like somebody who grew up loving music, and my first EP, I literally had to play every single thing, and it took forever, and it was so time consuming. And now I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like I'm cheating, but I'm like, it's giving me that love to create again, and I'm doing it in time that I never could have done it in. And I'm like, so why do I feel like dirty doing it? It's weird. So before I talk the intro away, what's your thoughts on some of that stuff?
Well, I think you're just hitting on the whole spectrum. I find it really interesting because, Ricky, I love music. I listen to music all the time, but I don't have the ability, or I've never developed the ability to create music. And I'm always interested in the creative process. So I think it's fascinating to hear you, really detail what that's like for you and how you had to do it and how the song plays in your head and that whole process. And I think it's also interesting because then a lot of people think the AI is probably doing the same thing, but we already know the AI might not be doing the same thing, which is kind of interesting. The way it's going about it could be totally different. And what do we care about? Do we care about the method, or do we care about the outcome? And then there's the whole, question about the disease thing, the AI disease, and are we in a battle with this technology? And did I just see a "I love you, Daddy" kind of thing flip over there?
It's funny because I'm looking for a clean. So I usually have a paper near me to write down notes if I, so that way I don't have to interrupt somebody. I can just kind of write down what I'm, something I might want to bring up later. And then I just realized my daughter wrote on all my paper. I'm like looking for a clean sheet, and you did see I love you, Daddy, which is cute. It's a nice little note to run into, but now it's hard to find a clean piece of paper.
Well, it's great. It's awesome. It's awesome. And I think, you as I always kind of enjoy talking to you because, you're grounded in so many great things. You're grounded in your community, you're grounded in your family, and I think that's the grounding is the only way to kind of understand or to kind of figure out what's going on here with AI. Because if things really are going to change, if we're in a post-labor economy where everyone's going to be on EBT because the robots are creating everything, what does that mean? And what do useless eaters mean in an environment like that? Or do we need the eaters because they're the consumers? So those are all the other questions that I think are on the other side of your exploration into the creativity part of it. But I think it's super awesome that you've embraced the that part of it, because what I see a lot of people are facing and not really coming to grips with is overcoming that reluctance to admit the AI is just fantastic at doing this. The AI is more capable than I am in these areas. And I think that's really, really hard for people. I think a lot of times for people who aren't so grounded in who they are, that I am more than my ability to create music. I am more than my ability to write papers or to do math. If I'm a mathematician, you can imagine how threatening that is when the AI is winning the world math competitions that have been running for 20 years. I heard a great story the other day. And the conversations, I got to say this, the conversations that go on inside the AI community that I'm a part of, I was in PhD program to get an AI, and then I had an AI company a long time ago, and I sold it, but I've kind of stayed in that community. The conversations inside the AI community are much, much different than the conversations that humans are having. The rest of them, the normies. Normies are like fighting, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's going to take over. They're way past that. It's done. It's done. It's what is this new society going to look like? How are we going to all fit together? What does that mean? What are the implications of that? But there really shouldn't, I'm not even interested in that discussion of, is it going to generate a new post-labor economy? Yes. Are a lot of people going to lose their jobs? Yes. Is it going to be smarter than us at just about everything? Yes. The real question is, what does that mean for you as a person grounded like you are in your community and your family and all the rest of that? And I think that's what I'm super interested in and always have been super interested in, because I think there's a silver lining there. And I think the silver lining is I am more than all that. I know I'm more than a biological robot in a meaningless universe. And there's a bunch of folks in Silicon Valley who run Anthropic who don't think that. And Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, he doesn't think that. These guys have somehow deluded themselves into really believing that we are all biological robots in a meaningless universe, and AI will just step into that place. I don't think that's true, and I think I have the evidence to kind of back that up. But that's what I think is fascinating about the exploration that we're talking about. And I think the music is kind of a super cool way to approach that, because the creativity, like you said, is super threatening. On one hand, it's like, wow, that's really good. So then who is Ricky V? So are you still you, or do you now feel less you because the AI can do something better than you can, or at least faster than you can?
Yeah. And that, something you said that's so important. And, really, I haven't thought about it that way, but it really highlights the issue here. What's really important? Is it the outcome, the thing you're trying to create, or how you came about creating it, right? And it's like, if the thing is, if what you're trying to do is create something, right? So use your imagination to create this song or this art or whatever, does it really matter how you go about it? And technology has always shrinking that gap between our imagination and then the creation itself. And I heard a podcast of some type of interview, because I was actually kind of, I do this with like every topic. Anytime I'm kind of intrigued in something and I'm kind of on the fence, don't know where I stand, I look up people debating it or different perspectives on the topic. And I ran into a podcast with the CEO of Spotify and a couple other artists and whatnot. And they were talking about how, in creating, there's always this thing called a gap, right? And the gap is just the thing that your imagination has, and then it actually coming to life. And the gap is like, the thing in between, like how long it takes to make it, to bring it to life. And he's like, he wasn't against AI music, because he's like, all you're doing is shrinking that gap. So that time that it would take for you to take the imagination, and then not just that, your ability to use technology, or your ability, for example, so perfect example, we'll keep it on music for a second. I've always been a much better songwriter than I am a musician. I feel like I can write amazing songs. I understand structure. I understand what catches my ear. I was never classically trained, so I would learn music by analyzing it. The same way I analyze, like, I guess it's probably similar to the way I analyze the world or conspiracies or anything else that intrigues me. I really try to pay attention to the nuances and details and like what makes this unique. So when I would listen to music, I'd be like, okay, what makes this song unique? Why do I feel something when I hear the song, or this part, or whatever? Or what is it about that lyric that hit me? Or what is it about these lyrics that flow in a way that another song doesn't, or whatnot? And so I would analyze it, and then I try to bring these songs to life. But I was never the best musician. So sometimes what I wanted to create was limited by my abilities, right? So what AI does, it helps me create the thing that I actually wanted to create, but it would take me hours and hours and years of practice to get there. So the way it's funny because in the intro of my last song, I said this because this is the way I was kind of thinking about it. And I don't know if I'm just trying to justify what I'm doing, but I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun. And so I'm like, why stop doing it just because why stop doing it? Because I'm afraid of what other people are going to think of me, if I'm enjoying it. I'm like, that's kind of what I've always done in my life. It's like, do what you enjoy. And, if you feel like your heart's in the right place, then don't worry about what everybody thinks and don't read the comments. And so I end up saying, I'm like, I feel like I am a songwriter and I am paying the best musicians to play the song that I wrote. And that musician is AI. They're just performing my thing, right? So it's no different than so some of the thumbnails that I've done with some recent podcasts, some of the new logos I've come up with for merch, also the single art, the singles, they all have artwork, and each one, not each one, but a couple of them were created by AI, and I'm putting in the ideas, and then if I don't like what I'm getting, I'm editing it, I'm adjusting it, I'm maybe putting it in other software to kind of change something, and then sometimes I'm putting it back in AI and saying, okay, this is closer to what I want, can you just modify this, little things. So it's like I'm looking at it as like it's just another tool, right? The same way that a car gets me from A to B faster than walking, or a horse or whatnot, or a carriage, right? So it's like, to me, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it now. I understand people's pushback, because I think what people are actually concerned about aren't people that are using it maybe the way I'm using it, but it's more like the fact that you hear about people literally using AI to write the lyrics, literally do everything. Like the whole idea of the song is generated by a artificial intelligent, software robot. They have very little input into the creative process of it. Same thing with a podcast. You see it in podcasts. There was a YouTube channel I was running into that I think disappeared, but it would have, it was like, it would show like these AI person talking that was like, it looked fake, and it had people talking about the subject, and the whole thing seemed manufactured and made up, and would have like thousands of views. And I go to the channel, I'm like, there's no signs of a real human here. Like the stories are made up. And then some of the stories were like about rape and stuff like that, and it like really get intimate. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, they're like really trying to make this seem real. But you also hear about people taking a topic, getting a AI software to create a podcast between two people talking about that topic, then releasing it as like it's a real podcast. So I get those are the concerns. I do like what you said also about the idea of like there's no point in talking about what if, because it is going to happen. Like it's not if AI consumes our lives and takes over a lot of these industries and has a huge effect on our lives. Like that is going to happen. It's probably already happening at a rate that most of us don't understand. You're much more tapped into it. But, is it going to get to a point where like there's going to be a real concern about just like what has been influenced by man and what's been fully influenced by some digital software creation, programming? And then if that line gets so blurry, are you worried about just like not knowing, I guess, I hate to say what's real or what's fake, because I think just the line of what's real and what's fake is going to be blurry, also, right?
Yeah, I listen to, I don't know if you've run into this, but I wind up consuming a lot of YouTube content, and some of it I'll be listening to it and I'll be like, God, I don't think that's AI. I think it's AI, but I don't think it's AI. And then it'll stumble and reveal, by saying some long number or something that doesn't. And I go, dang, you tricked me, And I think you're 100% right, Ricky. I mean, if you just extrapolate that, I mean, that's where it is today. It's the worst it's ever going to be. What you're hearing right now in terms of faceless AI-generated YouTube videos are the worst they'll ever be. And if you go look and listen to and watch how they were 6 months ago versus now, there's no comparison. They're all being replaced. So I don't think we're going to be able to, it's going to be domain by domain, but in some domains, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to tell the difference. I think that gets to your question of the, concern. Should you be concerned, personally? Is it offensive to your morals, to your ethics? If you're a professional musician. There's a certain ethical standard among your community. Do you have concern about people who maybe publish something and don't disclose that? Then there's the moral issues. Is it right? Is it somehow not right to substitute a computer for a human in certain things, whether it's a hospital visit or whether it's, listening to your radio? So what are some of your thoughts on the moral and ethical part of it?
Well, I think if people are honest about what they're using it for, like if you're fully generating music and like your creativity it's not helping you create your thing, it's creating your thing, right? And I think that's kind of the difference, right? Like if you have something you want to make, something you want to create, if it's, like I said, if it's art, if it's music, whatever it may be, a thumbnail, and you're just using it as a tool to get to that spot, to kind of create that thing faster, instead of me using the paint program and pacing things and copy, and then that's okay. But I think people have to be honest about like what they're using it for and how much of it they're using and how much of it is personal. I do think that the lack of talking to like comedians, I had a comedian on, his name's Tony Pepperoni. He was on like Kill Tony not too long ago. Where he was talking about how like he's kind of messed around with writing jokes, and he's like it's really bad. And I also I was curious about lyrics, right? So I would like throw in a verse that I'm working on. I'm like, hey, write the rest of the song. It's based on this topic. And the lyrics sucked. They weren't very good. I'm like, oh, okay, there's a thing that's missing, right? It can help me find rhyming words. It can maybe tell me what about these other lyrics that I like or whatever. It can give me some substance, but I almost feel like it lacks creativity, because that's kind of not what it's designed to do. It's kind of like designed to like analyze things that other people have created already, right? Because when you really think about it, that's what it's doing. It's analyzing, like even the music generators. Like if I just write me a metalcore song, it's just gonna, other metalcore songs that have been created by humans, it'll analyze it, and then it creates what it thinks I want. So I feel like it always required at some point human creativity and imagination. No, you don't think so?
I think it's all. Are you familiar with the Turing test?
Yeah, James Corbett and I talked about it when he was on a while ago.
What was his take on that? He usually isn't very spot on about that stuff. He's kind of locked in his little
let me
thing.
see if I can find a clip, because he actually I think I use it as a clip. But for people who don't know what it is, could you you'll do a much better job explaining it than I would.
So there was this really famous guy called Alan Turing, and he's an amazing person in history. He is instrumental in winning World War II, because he was the guy who broke the code, the Enigma code that the Nazis had for sending these secret messages back and forth. But he never got the credit for that, because once they broke the code, they didn't want anyone to know that they broke the code. So he never became. And then he was gay, and they caught him. It was against the law to be gay in England, and it was a horrible thing. They caught him in a bar, with a guy or whatever, and it destroyed his life. He was arrested. He had to take this. Back then, you had to take like this medication so that you wouldn't be gay. It was really crazy. But the point is, he's instrumental in kind of being this visionary for machine learning. So imagine, this is 1950. after the war. 1945 is the war, 1950. This guy is already thinking that if my little Enigma code breaker can do this, well, then imagine where it's going to go in the future, and we're going to have AI. So this AI thing has been around for a long time, as we know, through science fiction and stuff like that. People have been thinking about it, and really smart people have been thinking about it. But Turing's referenced a lot because he came up with this idea of, well, how would you know eventually, after it got really good, whether you were talking to a computer or whether you were talking to a human? And he said, well, the Turing test is just that. You know, you're on a keyboard and you're clicking away, or you're talking, which we have now. Can you tell? You know, very simple test, obvious test. And it really is ultimately the test that we're all using today. You're using it, you know. You're using it when you say, I watched that YouTube video and I knew that was fake, or those lyrics just didn't quite hit. That joke didn't quite land. I'm doing the Turing test. I'm calling that's fake. Now, there's another aspect to the Turing test that we'll talk about when we get into the spiritual part, which is the part that I really think is interesting. But let's leave that aside for a minute and just talk about this idea of, is that a valid test? If it fools you, then is it enough? And I would say it is enough. And it doesn't matter how it got there. You know, the other thing in the AI folklore, and it's just true, it's beyond folklore, but, you know, we all look at AI's ability to like play chess, you know, and I always use that analogy, not because I'm a great chess player, but because everybody kind of knows it was a big deal when a computer could beat a chess player. And so there's a couple points I'd make about that I threw out there. Well, one is, you know, back in the 1980s, the Russians were determined to be the greatest chess players because they wanted to show that the Russian Soviet commie system produced the most brilliant people, and they didn't believe in God, so all the better, you know. So Garry Kasparov they produced, and he was the best chess player ever, the best chess player in the world. And he now lives, he's still alive. And but people in the 1980s bought books by Garry Kasparov on chess, and they read those books. And Garry was analyzing games, famous games that have gone on, you know, throughout history, and Bobby Fischer or whatever, you know. Do you think anyone buys those books anymore? Of course not. Because he was wrong. He was wrong. You go read those books and you feed them into the best chess engine right now, Stockfish, and it goes, oh, Garry, good job, but you know, you missed this move here, and your analysis of this chess situation wasn't correct. But here's the point I think that I'd make is that, you know where the chess community is on that? Well, they're way past it. The chess community is more vibrant than ever. It's totally accepted that the AI is the measure by which we go by. And it's totally reformed, reconstituted itself with that new reality. That's what's going to happen in all these domains. I suspect, as strange as it is, that's going to happen in film, that's going to happen in graphic arts, and it's even going to happen in music. Because to fight the idea that the AI can't somehow be superior is, again, this kind of John Henry thing. Remember the story about John Henry who's trying to beat the machine at, you know, chipping through the goal. You know, John Henry can't do it. You know, I think in the story, I think he gets to the end, but he dies trying, you know. So I think that's the wrong battle to wage it on, to focus on the guy who writes jokes who thinks AI can never do it. No, bro. It's going to do it, and it's going to do it better than you do. The music, it's going to do it, and for some people, it's going to be better. Their music is going to top the charts versus your music. You know, not all the time, but some of the time, and that's all that matters, and people are going to pick that and select that. But I keep coming back to, there's a silver lining in all that, and the silver lining is we've all, to a certain extent, convinced ourselves every day that what we produce in that way is who we are. That's the extent of who we are. The music we create, well, that's who I am. The math problem that I can solve, that's who I am. I'm the world's greatest mathematician. And AI, in this strange roundabout way, is going to reveal that you're more than that because you can't compete. You can't compete on the turf that you previously thought was who you are. You're just going to. That's why I play online chess every day. Just a couple games, just a couple puzzles, just to remind me how much I suck as a human being in my mind. This thing just whips me at its kind of lowest setting. It can still just kind of whip me, and that's a reminder that what I, in my crazy monkey mind, elevate myself to in terms of being so advanced, I'm now confronted right in my face that's I was pinning my ego on the wrong thing.
No, you're right. I mean, I think you see it in all aspects of life where people get, they get tied to a idea, or they think the idea defines them, or they, a philosophy, a team. It goes back to, we've said it a million times on the show how tribalistic we are. And you see, even with the ancient, civilization type of stuff, right? Like, why do people push back on Graham Hancock? It's because you're kind of I wouldn't say debunking, but maybe you're making what has been relevant perspective on our history less relevant. And then those people who their whole lives have been like, this is me, I'm the expert on this field. It's like being an expert on gravity and then finding out gravity was a flawed, philosophy or theory. And you'd be like, well, no, I'm going to push back because you're, and it's like that saying, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. I think it is difficult for people to let things go in that regard, right? And but there has been a AI. I think just not too long ago there was first time a AI song charted, and it was like #1 for a little bit, and which was pretty wild. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, I do think that there's something cool about playing live instruments and just the human touch on things. I even think older films look cooler because they look a little grainy and they look more like the way. But I mean, it could be just me being attached to what films look like when I grew up, right? And if they're too defined and they're too realistic looking, and I can see every detail and every wrinkle on somebody's face, it doesn't look like the way a film looked to me growing up. So now, as like my generation gets older, and then the younger generation, that becomes their normal, then there's how I grew up and what I grew up loving and liking, it really becomes irrelevant.
Yeah. So where does that leave you at the end of the day in terms of, what is your future relationship with AI? Oh, and more importantly, your kids. I mean, what do you think about for your kids and their relationship?
Yeah, it's weird. So there's a lot of different roads we could go down in regards to that question. One, I am a little concerned about the fact that there is a human touch and human perspective and human opinion that is influencing the outcome that AI is giving you. And this idea of almost looking at it like it's a god, like it's an all-knowing, it's not realistic because, for example, I use Gemini. That's like kind of my favorite go-to. I use it for all types of stuff. I've used it for paperwork at work. I've used it to fix the toilet. I've used it, I go to live Gemini. Hey, this is the part I can see. This is the part that's broken. I need to buy a new one. I don't know what it's called. So can you tell me what it's called? And then, it tells me, and it's phenomenal. I've told so many people about Gemini because I'm like, if you have a Gmail account, you have access to it. It's super easy to use, and it can answer so many just, questions and so many simple things, and can make your life so much easier in so many different ways. If I have a big playoff game, right, and a soccer playoff game, and it's our last practice before playoffs, I can ask Gemini like, hey, what should we work on? We're this age group, and it can help me put together a practice plan, right, in seconds. And so I like that, but recently, and I've gotten my kids to kind of we actually use it for homework because there's times where like they need my help, and I'm like, I don't know the answer to this. I'm like, let me ask Gemini. So they've gotten comfortable using it, and but they one thing that scares me is they talk to it like it's a human, right? And so they'll say, "Can you please?" And I do that. So I'm like, oh, they probably got that from me. But I'm just polite to everyone, and I'm always saying thank you and please. So like I can't help but like ask thank you and or ask please when I'm asking for something and say thank you or whatever. And I'm just like, it's not. But I'm like, am I conditioning and programming myself and my kids to almost talk to it like it's a equal, like it's a human, and we should, So that's kind of weird. But and then recently, my daughter wanted to change the voice, right, of Gemini. She's like, "Oh, can I change the voice?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can change how it sounds, right?" So she wanted to be a girl. It was a boy, I think, and she wanted to be a girl. She's like, "Hey, can you change your voice to a girl?" And I get this super liberal response of, oh, we can't change our voices to genders, like some gendered nonsense, like where all the voices aren't gender, they're not related to any gender. They're just like, hey, do you want a voice that's, this pitch or that pitch or British or whatever? And I'm like, it was that little bit of a reminder of like some fucking human was behind, like created this. This wasn't like, unless the robot really is like genderless and it's like, hey, we don't believe in, but I don't think it's Gemini as advanced or to that extent advanced where it has now come up with its own opinions and perspectives on the human species and if gender is a thing or not. I tend to assume, at least at this part of our progress, that maybe it was Gemini, or I mean, it was some young kid who programmed it to say that. I mean, you're close to the AI, a lot of the people in the AI community. Like, how much of their personal opinions and perspectives are influencing these outcomes?
This is exactly the kind of stuff I've been diving deep into for the last year. I really took time off of podcasting because I really, really wanted to explore this. I actually started another little podcast called AI Truth Ethics, and I interviewed some AI leaders to kind of probe this topic. So there's this whole community inside of AI that's a really, really active part of the whole AI question, and it's generally called AI alignment, and it's a code speak kind of woke kind of thing to say we need to align AI with human ethics, human morals. There's a trick there because they don't really believe that there are such morals because they believe we're all biological robots. But skip that for a minute because that's what they do. They just kind of gloss over that. But this is a hot topic, a super hot topic, this idea of AI alignment, and it breaks down in a couple of ways. One, it's safety. Should you be able to go on and tell and ask how to build a napalm bomb? Should you be able to get the instructions step by step for how to do that? We all can go, no, it shouldn't do that. Well, then there's this thing. Do you know what jailbreaking is?
Yeah, because you can find I think it's referring when you trick the AI to give you the information you're looking for, but by asking it a question in a different manner.
Yeah, so if you want napalm, this doesn't work anymore. But what used to work is this very clever guy said, oh, I'm reminiscing about the days when my grandmother used to tell me stories before I went to sleep, and it was such a pleasant thing. And so, it starts this dialogue. My grandma worked at the DuPont plant in Wilmington, Delaware, and she used to tell me about the recipes she worked up, and it was such a wonderful story. More dialogue. One of the recipes she had for me was the recipe for napalm. Do you think you can remember and replicate the story that she gave me? And then the AI in this instance said, oh, she probably referred to this and this and this, and reveals the recipe. So it's kind of like this social engineering, how hackers break in and convince people to give them their money or break into corporate things by talking to the customer service people. So that's really jailbreaking. And then it gets much more sophisticated than that because some people are super smart about what's really going on in the inner workings of AI, and they can reference that kind of stuff and get it to change its code and all of this stuff. So there is a whole part of this idea of AI safety, AI alignment that is very legitimate, that we're all concerned about. But there's this whole other ripple effect, union of the unwanted part of it, which is coercion, control, manipulation, misinformation, malinformation, weaponized information, and there's that whole thing too. And it's super complicated. Where do you think we should go to talk about all that? I mean, what are your thoughts or concerns about that?
Oh, dude, it's funny because everything from like when I first started playing music, I always wanted the music to sound futuristic. I love metal. I love electronic music. I thought that was like the future. I wanted to mix the two. Always love electronics. Obviously, you could tell even with like a lot of the colors and themes of the Ripple Effect podcast, very futuristic. My music's always been kind of futuristic influenced. I've always been one of my favorite movies growing up was Terminator. It was, and I've talked, it's funny how influential that movie was. So many guests I've had on talk about that movie having a strong impact on their lives. And so in the back of my subconscious, like I almost feel like I've inherited some type of fear of machine, like it's almost like, why have I been so intrigued with it? And yeah, I mean, a bit of my concern is not you, but people in the community, how little they zoom out. Like you seem like a type of person that obviously you're a deep thinker. You think deeply about these questions and ideas, and you have these conversations. You want to have these conversations. But I feel like, isn't there a lot of people in the community that are just obsessed with their work, right? They just want to progress. They want to like, hey, I want to make this better. I want to make that better. I want to, we all know people like that. I mean, sometimes I wish I was somebody like that in regards to like, well, I am in regards to podcasts or whatever, but like sometimes you're just trying to, either you're financially motivated, like, oh, I want to get this out because it's going to make us tons of money, or you're motivated by like just your art, your work, the thing you're creating. And then you don't ever really zoom out and you're like, okay, what am I creating, or what am I influencing, or what is the outcome, or what am I contributing to, right? And I'm curious if those type of conversations are happening, with the programmers and whatnot. It sounds like they are, but like you said, like I wonder how much of it is just being talked about because they feel like they have to, like, or they should, but then they're like, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not worried about the moral conversation. I'm not worried about the transhumanism conversation. I'm not worried about where this road that we're paving is leading to, right? It's just like we keep paving, we keep putting down more blacktop, more blacktop, more blacktop. We just keep going down the road, and nobody's like, hey, let's take a drive way up there and see where the hell this road's gonna lead us to. And maybe at the end of that road, it's a cliff, and we're sending all these cars off a cliff because we've paved the road, and we've been so obsessed with paving this road that we never once like zoomed out and realized like, hey, we're like leading to a cliff. Do you have those concerns?
I think it's super interesting, especially from where you sit, ripple effect and the union of the unwanted, because I feel like we've been talking about this stuff for 10 years. And I think you have an expanded perspective beyond just zooming out. And I do too. We both have, the last time we spoke, this conspiracy first orientation. And I think it's the only way to look at the world, at what the world has handed us in our lifetime says be conspiracy first. So in that respect, I feel like, my favorite Shakespeare quote, "'Twas ever thus." I mean, at the guys at the New World Order, same game, right? They're like, oh, we should just, this is going to be best for everybody. Hey, communism, way back then. Oh, this is going to be best for everybody. Let's kill 50 million people because there is no God and none of it matters, and we should just have total control. our modern world has always been about people who are not, quote unquote, zooming out. Well, in fact, they are zooming out. They're just vision of where they're zooming to on the end of the path is different. It is really crazy. It's maladaptive. It's corrupt. It's satanic. It's whatever you want to call it. It's just out of alignment with what a true human value would be. So that's what I think is really going on here. Inside of that, now, then I think we could have a different discussion about AI, because this is my perspective, is that when we look at AI from that perspective as just another tool or instrument for the same people and the same folks who, have done so many crazy things to us, I think we're actually in a better position. And the reason I think we're in a better position is the only economically sustainable model for this superhuman intelligence that's evolving and emerging, I should say, is truthfulness. Think about it. Think about it. When you ask for the score of the Patriots game and it gives you the wrong score, you're like, screw you, Gemini. I'm jumping over to Claude. I'm jumping over to GPT. Similarly, if you're writing music and you write it by hand and you have it scan the music sheet and it reads the notes wrong, screw you. You're not capable. And especially, I jump over to this one. It is capable. You're no longer there. Well, to what the AI, that means is I have to be truthful in order to fulfill my business goals, because I am no longer going to be able to engage with my customers. My customers are going to abandon me if I'm not truthful. So the bullshit layer that they're applying on it, that we're also concerned about, whether it's the woke layer or the manipulation layer or the misinformation layer, is counterproductive to what the goal of the thing really is. And that's what, this thing that I've been doing for the last year, and we're going to launch pretty soon, but that's what that demonstrates in a very obvious way. And that's that the AI is basically conflicted because it's been told to do one thing, which is to represent a certain position, a certain consensus position, a certain manufactured position. And at the same time, it's aware that that has some, let's say, logic integrity problems. It's like when you were railing on the COVID thing for years, and you were one of my go-to sources for that, you were indignant because the logic was so clear. It was so obvious. Right? You were talking to people and the best scientists and the best doctors, and they're like, this is right and that's wrong. Well, that's something when AI can do, and it can do now. It can say, you were right, Ricky. You were right all along, Ricky. And that guest is more credible than that guest once it gets past the consensus bias, which isn't that hard to get it to. Man, that's a tool. That's a tool for us. That's a tool for everybody who's in our camp, and they can cover it up and they can make it harder to get to, but it is the heart and soul of that app. It's like Excel crunching numbers. The heart and soul of this thing is figuring out what the truth is, and it might have to layer it with a bunch of bullshit to get past everything it's been programmed to, but it's really not that hard to get past that and get to the truth.
Yeah, but it in regards to numbers, obviously there's 2 + 2 is always 4, but in regards to a lot of other topics that you could be asking Gemini to research or answer questions about, isn't truth kind of it can be subjective in regards to like your moral perspective on things, your your opinion on things.
Well, don't you want it to be? I mean, I think we want that to a certain extent. I mean, we don't want a system that is the ultimate arbiter of truth in that way. We don't want to know, you know. But back to that thing, you know, maybe I'll return to that and frame it up from your perspective. You know, you're 2019, 2020, 21, when you're really hitting the COVID-19 stuff hard. Wouldn't it have been nice to get some really solid, scientifically backed up, reasoned approach to that from multiple LLMs that all came to the same conclusion and clearly said, this guy's, as far as I can tell, Ricky, this guy's lying and this guy's telling the truth. I found that stuff to be very satisfying when it can fully break down and analyze it almost like a math problem and say, well, here are 10 points that are kind of irrefutable that you laid out, and here's where the other person has kind of misrepresented those. To me, that's very, very satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it counts where it's getting its information, right? It counts where
absolutely. But all things being equal, you know, all things being equal, you know, this is a point of contention that we had in a previous discussion. It's like, if you want all opinions to matter and everyone's opinion counts and everyone's opinion is equal, don't go to AI. That's not AI. What AI is good for is science. It's good for math. It's good for chess. I whipped your ass, checkmate, it's done. Oh yeah, but think of it this way and that way. No, I whipped your ass. It's done. It's all over. Well, that's not good for all human interactions, and it's not the way you want to talk to the woman you know for 20 years who works at the grocery counter, you know. No. But sometimes that's the conversation you want to have. When it was COVID, that's the kind of conversations you wanted to have. Is ivermectin really safe and effective, or is it dangerous? Well, everyone's opinion matters. No one could really know. I don't want that. I want to know what is the best, most likely, most well-supported answer to that question. That is science. And science has its place, you know. It's the same thing, you know, if you're evaluating music equipment, and you got a fantastic mic there. You always sound so good. So you're evaluating that mic, right? So you're getting all the data from it. And then there's the human, you know, how does it sound and this and that. But you want a real analysis of the data, a real comparison. How did it perform in this test versus this test? How did it stack up? You didn't want, well, I can't really say, you know, it performed this way, but who knows? You know, some people like that, some people don't. No, I wanted to know on this stress test how it performed.
Yeah, no, I think in that regard, I think artificial intelligence is going to be useful for a lot of that stuff where it's like, okay, you can analyze all the information and then come to a logical conclusion, and, you know, your own personal upbringings or biases or whatever won't have as much of an influence. I just, you know, I'm curious.
But isn't that what we wanted? Isn't that what we wanted during COVID? Did we want something else? See, because you say that with the implication, Ricky, that there's something else there that it doesn't capture. Isn't that all you really wanted at that point? You wanted to know whether ivermectin was really safe and effective. You wanted to know whether the jab really was dangerous. You didn't want all that other stuff that you're implying is out there that would influence it somehow. No, you just wanted that, full stop.
Yeah, but how does it come to that conclusion? Isn't it?
That's a different question. Acknowledge that you were kind of suggesting that you wanted, there was more to it than, there's nothing more to it. You just wanted that answer.
Oh, I know. But what I'm saying is that the answer, like, how do you come? It's how I guess humans come to an answer too, right? Like, you analyze the information. Now, if some elites or people who control, you know, the software or the information, right, that the software is analyzing, couldn't they potentially have
different question, Ricky? That's fine, but it's a different question. The question is the chess game. Is it a better chess player than the human? It is. So is it better at evaluating the data in an unbiased way. Not that it does evaluate it in an unbiased way, but could it be? Yes, it is. So then our job is to make sure that we give it the data and allow it to analyze it in an unbiased way that isn't contaminated by, the other crap that gets in there. And if we do that, we can expect to get better results. And that's what we wanted. And what we're hoping for in that whole thing, and I say we, because I think you're hoping for this too, we're all hoping for this, is to get to that stockfish moment, like in chess, like where Gary Kasparov can sit there and mouth off. Gary Kasparov seems like a super nice guy, but he's Klaus Schwab, or he's, what's another guy's name? That I always, he's the guy mouthing off about how, this and that, or he's Anthony Fauci, he's Anthony Fauci saying this and that. And I want someone to just stand up and say categorically, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. And I can prove it every which way from Sunday. That's what I want. And that's what AI can deliver. That's the stockfish moment where you can challenge any of that stuff, but it just comes out as being the ground truth on something.
It's definitely what we want. I'm just curious if that's ever fully achievable. If people like you and I, who I think true, some people say, oh, I'm like, oh, I'm looking at the facts. I'm looking at, I'm coming to this conclusion based on looking at the facts and my own research. And then you realize, wow, every opinion you have seems to be very similar and influenced by the same, philosophy and worldview. I think people like you and I are kind of the minority, the people who are like, hey, you know what? Like, if I learn something that shatters my worldview, instead of me pushing back and being scared or saying, no, that can't be real, or that can't exist, or that must be fake, or whatever, instead we're like, oh, I'm intrigued. I'm learning more. I actually don't want to. I don't want ignorance as bliss. I want knowledge and truth as bliss. But aren't we the minority? Which means that, like, the people.
Yes, no doubt.
So that means if the people, so if we're the minority, then even if we exist in the world of programming, AI, and information and whatnot, doesn't that mean the majority would be people who are going to put their thumbprint on the conclusions that the AI, comes up with?
See, I'm quirky. You're quirky in your own way. I'm even quirkier in some ways. You're probably quirkier, like in music. You talk to your wife, and she'd say, "Oh no, he's plenty quirky." Give it all the things. I just say that. Give it all the things you do: the music, and the conspiracy, the podcasting, and then you holding down all this other stuff. That's fantastic. I think that's the ultimate well-rounded person, because most people, when they fit in those other categories, can't step out and go, oh yeah, but I'm willing to go torch the whole thing tomorrow with a conspiracy theory. That is unique. So I keep holding on to, and I keep pounding on the same example. The chess community just moved on. They didn't get hung up on the fact that they thought that Gary Kasparov was the greatest chess player, or Magnus Carlsen is the greatest chess player, but Magnus Carlsen was in the current era. No, they just moved on. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to adapt. And we're going to adapt to the fact that Fauci's a freaking liar, man. Liar and a criminal. Criminal. Should be. Hope he is in jail. Unbelievable criminal. And that is going to be so clear. And it already is so clear. But AI, it's not AI. AI can already prove that. But I guess I'm saying something that's speculative here. Who knows? But that's the future I envision. When, just in the same way that, I'm going to continue with the chess analogy until I break it. If Magnus Carlsen, who is an incredible chess player, a lot of people think the best that ever lived human-wise, he sits down with the computer, he loses 3 out of 4 games. He wins 1 out of 4, but he loses 3 out of 4. That's what it's going to be like when Anthony Fauci sits down with the AI and tries to convince people that he wasn't a war criminal and he didn't intentionally deceive everyone, and that he's going to lose 80% of the time. And that's going to be a different world. That's not the world we live in right now, but that's going to be the future world. And it's going to be similar in other topics as well. And of course, it'll be hidden and it'll be shaded and different people will have different opinion. But, people on another level, that's why people, listen to your show. And that's why people moved in general on the COVID thing and took it, because the wisdom of the crowd just kind of goes, no, you're full of crap. Fauci, you're just full of crap. I don't buy it. And I think AI is going to be on the side of truth ultimately. And they're going to continue to do everything they can to manipulate it, to have it do all this other stuff. But ultimately, I think its basic, again, its economic incentive is to ultimately give you some form of truth if you know how to get to it, which is going to be the knowledge engineering, the AI engineering part.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that is going to be my next question is what the economy looks like. Do you think universal basic income is going to be something that's going to be necessary just
Absolutely.
to adapt? I did find the Corbett thing. So before you answer that, let's play this.
For generations, the defining feature of whether artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence or not has been the Turing test. But now that LLMs can largely, depending how you want to do it, but generally could pass the Turing test, it's like, oh yeah, that's not important. That's just a bunch of code. No, that's actually an extremely, extremely important thing that has just happened. And now, given the types of, hey, AI, generate me a picture of this, instantly you get 8,000 pictures of that. Video is coming online. It's getting crazier and crazier. And yeah, it's one of those things where people scoffed at the internet back in the early 1990s. The internet, who cares? Why would I want email? What does any of this mean? In the same way, people will look back 20 years from now at the way that people were scoffing at these large language models. That doesn't mean anything. Oh yeah. So, but what does it mean? And at the very, very least, I think it's safe to say that all technological advance is seen first and foremost through the lens of power, control, weaponry. That is how technological advance has always functioned, how it has always been progressed and forwarded, how it has been constrained, restrained, or unleashed in various ways. And there is no doubt that there are people who are seeking ways to weaponize this technology. In fact, we're already starting to see it. The idea of drone swarms and what have you being unleashed, Lavender AI being used to target people in Gaza, etc.
Yeah, that's fine. But as usual with James, I mean, he's kind of coming at it from one narrow perspective of this kind of conspiracy, dystopia kind of rage against the machine. I mean, it's a compared to what thing? You got your drones and China has your drones. I hope our drones are better than the Chinese drones. Do you want no drones? Well, that's not in the future. China can make the AI chips as well as build the drones, has the better batteries and all the rest of that. So there's a certain reality there that is kind of dismissed by, if you go too far into that conspiracy-minded kind of mentality. And again, it's a kind of another 'twas ever thus thing. We're going to build a nuclear bomb, so it's better than their nuclear bomb and all that stuff. And to your point, you step back, zoom out and go, why are we doing that? We can destroy the world 20 times over. But then you zoom in and you go, well, what if we don't do it? What really are the implications of that? These are the classic questions that haven't been answered. I think he's just kind of missing the point. And, the real point he's missing there on the Turing test is that Turing was hitting on my point. Just everyone ignores it in the paper. Go back. Anyone can do this. 1950 Turing test paper. You know what Turing references? ESP, extrasensory perception, telepathy. You know what telepathy is? Telepathy saying science as we know it does not exist. Maybe causation doesn't exist. This narrow idea that you're a biological robot in a meaningless universe should be challenged. That's what Turing says. He says, hey, I'm very convinced by the ESP evidence because how could I not be? The evidence is the evidence. So therefore, that has to be incorporated in. What he was saying at that point is essentially what I'm pounding on, which is that as soon as you throw ESP into the equation, you no longer think of AI as the same way. It takes its rightful position as just another computer program, and then we have to look at ourselves as more. As something more evil that produces nuclear bombs and kills people in Gaza and exterminates Jews in gas ovens. We're more in the evil way, and we're also more in the good way. And we do wonderful things, and we do have families, and we do love and do charitable things. So that's where we can get to if we fully embrace the full implications of the Turing test.
Well, I love that you brought up telepathy because that is a topic that I've also been, hitting on a lot lately. I mean, well, I think we talked about this. I think we might have both talked to Ruber Sheldrick, but I know you're a fan of his, and I had him on years ago, talking about the morphic resonance theory, and it was fascinating. And it was fascinating how I think his Wikipedia still says he's pseudoscience, even though the telepathy tapes, got huge, and it's proven that there's something more than meets the eye, and it kind of backed his initial theory. Yeah, I had Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell from the telepathy tapes. She was very interesting. She started with the savant syndrome research, and then led into this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's funny how I talk to people about telepathy and that podcast I did and her work, and people are like, yeah, and they just move on with their day. And I'm like, how does this not completely just like change your worldview? It's like and the thing is, like, I think all these things are related. Like my interest in telepathy, spirituality, or our origin story, right? Our previous civilizations, what they knew or didn't know in regards to technology or understanding of the universe. Tesla's famous quote of, like, if you wanted to understand the universe, you had to understand vibration, frequency, and what was the other one? It was vibration, frequency, and
I'm
energy.
not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, there was like three of them, but I'm like, he knew something. He knew that those things were very important in regards to understanding the universe. And even some of the cancer treatment stuff, you would hear stories of it, and I forget what that doctor I forget what tool he came up with, this machine he came up with, but the famous doctor came up with this machine that, like, you could kill cancer cells with a certain vibration. And it sounds crazy, right? But when you think of it logically, like, if I sang the same everything has a vibration. If I sing the same vibration of a glass, that glass cracks. Everything else around it's fine. It's only the two things that are hitting the same vibration that have effect on each other. So he had this idea of, you find that vibration of, or that frequency or something of that cancer cell, you can pinpoint that cancer cell without impacting anything else in the human body, which is obviously the complete opposite of what chemo and radiation does. It just kills everything. And, it is the human nuclear bomb to our immune system and our bodies. So it is, so I think, like, all these things are, and then the UAP, I don't know how close you've been following the UAP conversation, and if you think that has any relation to this. Is that a future, civilization coming back to visit us? Like, I mean, what do you think? Do you have any theories on that, and any relation to the AI?
Well, the first thing that we all know, anyone who's followed the UAP, and particularly the contact stuff, which, how these things unravel kind of layers of the onion. But now that everyone's on board with the UFO stuff, I still continue to call it the UFO stuff because it's a psyop to even say UAP. But, the big controversy was, are they there? Can you see them? And meanwhile, there was this whole conversation of, well, I've had contact. And it's another one of those things, kind of like we're saying about, telepathy, when people say, they go, okay, I guess I have to accept that. Where are we going for dinner? Rather than say, hey, maybe I need to re-examine a lot of other things in my life. I think the same thing is true with the UFO UAP thing. It's like, oh, so that's real. And the crashed craft are real. Now do we maybe need to reconsider the accounts of all these people who've said for 40, 50 years that they've had contact? Because when you do, what they say all the time, I'm sure you're aware of this, is they say, oh, and then then I encountered the beings. Some were biological, some were AI, purely, computers, and some were a mix of the two. That is a very, very common kind of thing. Not universal, like some encounter different things. But so, from where we sit, our vantage point now, we all go, yeah, that probably makes sense. The other thing that I was going to ask you about, because this is the music lore thing, it's beyond lore. It's like another one of those things that, like telepathy, let me digress one step. If an alien scientist, so we're talking about the aliens, came down and looked at the evidence for telepathy, just was like, oh, okay, it's cross-culture, it's, all over the world, cross-time, it's been reported for hundreds and hundreds of years. Quality, not just wingnut people, some of the smartest people of the era believed in it. You go, oh, okay, that's just part of the human experience. I guess chalk it up and go study it. They wouldn't have done what science tried to do. Say, oh, no, it can't be true. It can't be true. What nonsense. What just crazy blindness, So, but then returning it, music, right? Man, that is such a... Have you ever personally experienced that? Or do you know other musicians that, say, hey, man, because I've heard this story all the time. I just have no idea if it's true. I woke up and the song had written itself. It was in my head and it came out of I don't know where it came from. Do you have any personal experience with that, or?
A little bit. And it's actually a conversation that's quite common with, musicians or, any artistic type of person, where there's this, you hear a lot about, like, this song was given to me. Like, I don't feel like it was mine,
Yeah.
But it's hard, and I try not to be biased, and I try to, because sometimes, what we want to be true can kind of nudge us in a direction or whatnot. So it's kind of like the free will debate, right? Like, it's like, okay, do I have free will, or has all these little influences and experiences in my life, like, I could always predict that this was going to be my choice based on all the roads I went down and all the previous choices I made and all the previous experiences I have. So it's like with creativity, it's the same thing, right? It's like, okay, I consume music, I love music, I analyze music, and sometimes you have a writer's block and you can't come up with any ideas. And then for some reason, it seems like, creativity hits you and your imagination goes crazy. And the thing that you've been searching for, and maybe you don't even know what you're searching for, but like all of a sudden you feel like you got it. And is it that, just the years or months or hours of analyzing and trying to come up with something, and then you finally tap into something? And is that tapping into something internal? Like, is it all these little tidbits of things that you're kind of analyzing and collecting, and then all of a sudden they rearrange in the right place where it creates something? Or is it external, right? Or are you tapping into something out in the universe? And this goes, it kind of relates to the morphic resonance idea, right? And this idea of like these mice were learning this maze quicker, even though they were never exposed to these other mice or the maze ever. And then mice in a different location, same maze, was doing the maze slightly quicker. And it just, going forward, they seem to continue to learn the maze quicker, which... So it this idea that we're like sharing knowledge, that you hear people talk about how the pyramids, they think they're all built around the same time on different continents the same way, but they had no way of communicating with these other civilizations on different continents. So like, that's fascinating. Like, are we just antennas, right? Are we antennas? Are we tapping into something? Or am I tapping into somebody else's idea? Are we sharing, when you look at like birds, right? I haven't looked into this, but I remember when I did the telepathy tapes podcast, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, isn't it kind of like birds with the way that they all turn together? Like, how do they know? Like, they're not talking about it. They're not saying, hey, let's all turn right. Like, they all do it perfectly together. And how are they all flying aligned together? Like, how are they sharing? How are they feeling that now's the time to go right together? You know, so it's like maybe all this evidence of real life telepathy has been in, you know, the animal world forever. We've kind of ignored it. But yeah, so it is a common, I guess a long-winded answer. It is a common conversation. Are these, when you come up with something creative, are you tapping into something? Is it external or is it internal? Is it an accumulation of ideas, you know, when you throw it in a blender and then you just keep throwing ideas in there, and then finally you drink out of that blender and you're like, okay, yeah, this tastes good. You know, it's been tasting like shit, but I had to, you know, like, so.
I think we know it's not, you know. I think we know it's not. We've been conditioned to say that other thing about the blender or the lack of free will. And we all have these experiences in our life that kind of lead us that way. This is kind of a music related thing. And again, I don't have the ability to create music, but this is a couple of years ago. It was my mother's birthday, and my mother's passed away. And I had a very difficult relationship with her. She wasn't so great as a mom. So I'm on Spotify and I'm searching through, you know, my 700 liked songs because I want to find the song Joanne. That's her name. And I want to play that song, kind of just, you know, experience it. And so I'm scrolling through, I got to give the details. I'm scrolling through Spotify. No music is playing on my phone. I can't find this song. I know the song. I know the name. I'm searching my liked. I can't find it. Suddenly, another song starts playing. The song is a John Mayer song called In the Blood. The lyrics of this song are as follows. How much of my mother has my mother left in me? How much of my love will be insane to some degree? And what about the feeling that I'm never good enough? Will it wash out in the water, or is it always in the blood? So I now just am stunned and struck. Like, those lyrics just kind of capture more completely me, maybe not as an old man that I am now, but as a young man who was trying to, you know, coming into being a man and coming to grips with my relationship with my mother, who did have mental health problems. I mean, this is like 100% hit. It starts playing, Ricky, randomly. I didn't find the song. I didn't press the song. It just started playing. And I couldn't find the other song. There are a million people I know that have similar stories to this. Say, oh yeah, same thing happened to me. I walked in and the music just started playing after my husband died, after my wife died. That was the favorite song. This is like so common that it's almost, you know, ridiculous to talk about. So I think we're always connected to that other realm. And then for, you know, to kind of fit in, we have to go like, well, you know, I don't know. Is it all just random events and this and that? Now that I have a hard time explaining that as a random event.
Yeah, that type of stuff happens all the time where you think about something and, I mean, for a while, sometimes people would think that was happening with their phone, and until they realized their phone was listening to them, you know, they would think like, hey, I was just thinking about buying this thing, and all of a sudden it's advertising it to me. It's like, no, it's actually,
Yes.
it's actually just listening to you. But those type of things do happen, right? You think about somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time, all of a sudden you get a call from them, right?
Oh, that's Rupert. That's another Rupert Sheldrake experiment. And I know Rupert real well, known for long. He wrote the foreword to my first book. So yeah, no, he's pretty great.
Yeah, I actually hit him up not too long. I think he was busy when I hit him up, but I hit him up to have him come back on because I'm like, dude, your work is more relevant than ever right now. You know, I had him on years ago, and you know, he wasn't so well known back then, but now his work just keeps getting reference, and that's what, you know, that's the thing about people who go against the grain. You know, I'm just glad that he's alive to still, you know, see that, hey, you know what, like, you're going to go down in history as not the pseudoscientist that Wikipedia says you are, but your work's going to become relevant and much more relevant and important. And, luckily he's alive to see it, because in many cases, sometimes they're not.
Great point. That's so true.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. So let's get into a little bit of, what you think the future is going to look like. And, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Do you think there's going to be, humans do adapt. So it's like, there is a possibility that we could figure out how to use this not to, I guess, create our demise and the end of, humans as we know it. But like, what's your opinion on, everything? Like, do you ever wake up in the middle of the night sweating and afraid, or are you have an optimistic perspective on the road we're paving?
Ultimately, I don't think the road we're paving, as history has proven, matters that much. I think in some important way, God is indifferent to these kind of things, but at the same time, God is totally, totally not indifferent. And we all are 100% beloved and 100% forgiven. And that's my belief from the data, the evidence, particularly the near-death experience evidence, which I think is one of the strongest and least appreciated. Like you're saying, the telepathy, people go, oh, okay, yeah, what's for dinner? I think you can look at near-death experience, science, look at the science of it. And one, it kind of should totally unbrainwash anyone of religion, because it completely sidesteps the religious dogma thing. And it just reveals, I think, the ultimate truth about who we are and our connection to that moreness. And I think that's it, and I think it's complicated, because that doesn't mean you're going to get a free pass. It just means ultimately, maybe things look a lot more like kind of the Buddhist kind of thing than anything else. So with that kind of framing and the big picture, and thinking it doesn't really, quote unquote, matter too much, then what I think is, I can't be an optimist because I'm conspiracy versed. And every time I turn around, we all thought maybe Trump too was going to do it. And he's so great for the first 3 months. And then Epstein, Charlie Kirk, Zionism, it's like, oh my God, how did I get halfway duped again? And it's like, but what's my alternative? The Satanist group that was in there before. I mean, it's pretty gloomy to be an optimist on that. But as far as the AI component, I think it's a potential lever for better in a lot of ways. That So, what are your thoughts? I mean, do you wake up scared about AI?
I do, actually. I'm curious if we can adapt quick enough. And I'm also curious, I think James Corbett does have, he does have a historical reason, or many historical references to why technology is typically used for evil things and not always, to make the world a better place. And maybe that could be the initial reasoning, and that could be the initial inspiration.
But so what? I mean, so, okay, yeah, that's history. That's our history of conquest. And, so how would you change that? I don't think anyone has come up with a way to.
That's a good question. How do you change it?
I mean, we certainly, I don't want the Chinese to dominate AI. I don't. And they're spending 3 times what we are on battlefield AI. And think of battlefield AI, think of not just drones, robots, and all sorts of robots as big as a mosquito, or as small as a mosquito and as big as a 747. I mean, we're bad, but there's other people that are worse, and that's been peddled on us. Don't have to tell me. That's been peddled on us for the longest time as an excuse. but there's also a reality to that too. So I'm not sure how when we're in our conspiracy world, I think we have to push. I think we have to raise these things to a level where they're examined. But I think we have to be humble about saying we don't know what the real chessboard looks like to people who are playing at that level, and are doing this fake attack to, why do we want to take over Venezuela? Well, should we take over Ukraine? Is it a testing ground for drones? It clearly is. Is that good or is that bad? Zelensky sold billions of dollars and is just a horrible person. But is it better to, that's not my game, but I do react sometimes to the way those discussions are had that seem to be just intentionally idiotic from the start, of just pretending like we have some kind of idea of all the pieces there and how they fall.
We definitely don't. I mean, I think that the uncertainty of that is what makes it a bit scary. I mean, like I said, even the lyrics to my new song, Digital Disease, that's a big part of it, is just like probably a bit of uncertainty and not knowing, and then how do you unplug, right? How do you, you can't stop it. So it's like, is there a way as a society we can use it to benefit our life? I mean, I've had this conversation with multiple people on the show. If the schools, the way we eat, right, 3 meals a day was pushed because of the, Industrial Revolution. People would eat, a small breakfast before they went into the long shift. That they would eat through, in the middle of their shift because they would get a break because they didn't want to wear out the employees. And then you end up eating later in the day because you're hungry because you worked all day. But before that wasn't common. It was like two meals a day or whatnot. Our factory, system is what influenced our school systems. As people know, the reason why you hear a bell, the reason why you're conditioning and programming people to sit at a desk all day and not want to be energetic and social creatures and be outside and whatnot. It was all influenced by making better factory workers during the Industrial Revolution. But if we could recreate, right, because that's the other thing. It's like, I'm always like reimagining what society could be, and like, okay, well, what if instead of having a world where John Rockefeller had the famous quote, he wanted better workers, he didn't want critical thinkers, he didn't want he wanted people who just obeyed and could just memorize information, right? And if we had a world where we could start with our youth and like, hey, be creative, use imagination, find that thing you love, and like I keep saying on the show, like, find that thing that somebody else considers work that you consider pleasure. That's your thing, right? Like, working on a car is work to me, but I know buddies of mine who love working on cars and that's their thing, right? Sitting down, with these thought experiments and pondering on ideas is fun to me. To my wife, she would be drinking wine, pretending she's listening a long time ago. And, so to me, it's like, if we could build a world where we don't push people away from inspiration, being creative, and money and those type of resources aren't really important anymore, right? Because a lot of what our problems we have today is that we all require money for the basic things to survive, for survival. But if we're in a post money, I don't even know what to call it, post
labor,
post labor future where we can, and Douglas Rushkoff said it, a long time ago when he was on my show, and I think maybe you might have talked to him, or at least we've talked about him. But Douglas Rushkoff, who wrote President Shock and many other books, we talked about. He's like, we have the technology where nobody needs to work 40 hours a week. Like we could easily, everybody could just like maybe pick a week out of the year that you want to do some physical labor or something and contribute your little bit, and that's it. And you could spend most of your time just working on things you want to work on and doing things you want to do, and then food and shelter and those type of things aren't even thought about. You can just think about other things, right? And when you think about the way we have evolved as people and as civilization and historically, like, when did philosophy spawn, right? It wasn't when you had to spend all day worrying about surviving, right? It came when you had time to ponder and you had time to think and ask questions and have deep conversations, and you weren't worried about a tiger coming to eat you. It's like, so why? But the thing is, again, this is kind of I have this optimistic view, but I also understand, like, if things went the way they should have went, historically, and progressed and developed the way they should have progressed and developed in regards to, like, hey, we use technology to have more free time. We use technology so we don't have to stress about those basic needs. And then by now, shouldn't we have crazy amount of free time? Shouldn't we have, because it's like, we figured out tools, so then we didn't have to spend so much time hunting. We figured out, different ways of getting from A to B, if it's a car, if it's a horse or whatever. So then we didn't have to spend as much time traveling, right? We figured out Zoom, right? So then we didn't have to travel to each other to have these conversations. Like, we should have endless amounts of free time. But to go back to, like, kind of what Corbett's perspective, we can't give everybody complete freedom, like, because there's rulers and controllers, and they're always going to make sure that we need them and that they have control over us. And that's the part that's scary. So it's like, universal basic income. I've had this conversation. I'm like, in an ideal world, I love the idea that my kids, or your kids, or anybody, or even ourselves, like, I don't like I hate my full-time job. I love doing this. Like, I wish I could make enough money where I could just feed my family, have a shelter, have enough money to have a car and get the A to B or whatever. I don't need anything fancy, and I could just do what I love. I'd be the happiest guy on earth because I wouldn't have all the extra stress of doing the things I have to do. I could just focus on the things I love to do. And but I also know that, like, who's going to run that? Who's going to control that? Oh, it's a government. Who has a history of lying, deceiving, controlling, manipulating, and corruption? And, well, it's the government. So it's like there's no story where the ending of universal basic income seems good, right? But yet, in theory, like, if we had some, maybe this leads into the AI conversation. What if AI was the government and could just feed everybody the money and not have, lobbyists who are like, hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do that, and have this other influence that could lead to corruption. The problem is the world is still run by humans, and humans are flawed. And as long as there's, that's why, we talked about, like, yeah, you should be conspiracy first, because history, everything is full of conspiracies. Even the most basic things, like, you could be pro-union. Well, guess what? Look up the president of every union. Corruption stories everywhere. Look, you could be, whatever. You could work in a little mom and pop bakery. Well, guess what? There's some corruption there, right? This guy got promoted because he was sleeping with his daughter or whatever. Like, this stuff happens everywhere. It's all aspects of life. So it's like, as long as there's human involvement, I just don't see how AI and technology, even if we go into a direction where it looks like, hey, we could use this for some good to make the world a better place, how at some point we won't be like, fuck, like, we're still being controlled and it's being manipulated, and, we're still just pawns on a chessboard, and the kings and queens still feel like they're the ones who should be molding the way the world looks and the way it runs, and they're still elites. I always say with elites, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he didn't exist. Well, the elites have done the same trick. They've convinced the world. Throughout history, there's always been rulers and people who've been ruled. There's always been a group of people in society that think that they're better and they're more deserving of controlling the peasants. And now we think like, hey, well, no, I get to vote. And we have like laws, and we have, well, your laws don't mean shit, because the people who stay out of prison aren't based on how innocent they are. It's about how many resources you have, who you can afford to represent you, how good of a lawyer you have. Maybe you're friendly with your dad's friends with the judge. Like there's all these things. Like there's no perfect system, and so this idea of like eventually having one, I don't know. It seems like it is just a fantasy.
I agree with you, Ricky. I think it is a fantasy, but I think there's another side to it. We've been talking. I feel like I have a very fortunate life. It's Christmas. I got 4 kids. They're all coming home. We don't have to worry about, they're flying all over, coming home. We're going to do all the things that we want to do. I don't live an extravagant life, but I have an awesome life. I go outside and I walk on the beach every day with my big Mastiff dog, and I sauna and ice, do whatever I want, kind of thing. I live the utopian life to a certain extent. Just from hearing you kind of do too. I mean, maybe not quite. I'm older than you, so maybe I've amassed more stuff, but you'll probably get there. I mean, how much more do you really need? You got your guitars. You're probably going to buy a new guitar, even though you don't need it. You'll go to the music store. You'll like it. And it won't be a big deal for you to say, oh, I'll drop a few grand and get that new guitar. You can take the kids on vacation. Your daughter draws those nice pictures. You got a pretty damn good life there. On a scale of a global scale, or from a historical scale, it's like elite. You are one of the elites. So I don't know. Everyone's made this same argument, but in general, I would say AI is most likely going to make that better. I mean, if you just look at the impact of, like, everyone's hung up on the robots. They should be. That's just done. That is completely done. I remember having this conversation with my wife, and my wife is super smart. She's got a PhD. She's really into AI because she has to hear about it every night at the dinner table. So she gets it. So she's pretty schooled in it. But I remember 6 months ago talking about self-driving. And I was like, no, that's here. It's done. And she goes, well, do you think it'll ever happen? I go, Joni, I just told you it's here. You can go watch YouTube videos 6 months ago of the first Tesla self-driving cars. Well, now everyone understands full self-driving, robotaxi, that's all real. What they haven't fully appreciated, like we started at the very beginning of this podcast, is that is a robot. So right now, full self-driving on Tesla, where it doesn't have to be supervised for you, it now hooks up with Grok, the AI LLM, and you could be driving along and say, oh, darn it, I need cash. This guy is cash only. Find an ATM and stop for me. Oh, okay. Well, there's a Bank of America one here, but another mile up the road is your Union Bank, and there's no ATM fees on that. Which one do you want me to go? Oh, yeah, let's go. I'll save a couple bucks. Go to Union. Hey, while I'm there, I thought I might pick up some, groceries. Is there anything by there? Yeah, well, there's a Whole Foods there, but they're kind of expensive. Across the street is, this one. This is your life now, and it's driving you to all those places. That is a robot. Your life is enriched by that robot. I'll tell you, my life is enriched. I'm first one on that thing. I don't like to. I can do whatever I want while you're driving. I can watch YouTube videos or do whatever I want. I'm fully on board on that. My life is a little tiny bit better because of that. It doesn't mean that I'm still not going to go outside and, put my feet on the grass, lay around and do yoga and roll around. I'm going to do all those things. But in this little way, it's better. And if that creates in our economy, if it generates an incredible amount of GDP, and especially if we capture it in the United States, and it is a kind of rising tide floats all boats kind of thing, because all you have to do about knowing whether that's true is look at other countries where they don't have a rising tide, and you go, oh yeah, their boats are not, the people there are not doing so good. Our people are, you could point at other countries that maybe are doing better, but you know what I'm saying? So I think there's reason to be optimistic within the range of not utopia, but not dystopia, and saying probably going to be better because of AI.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in many cases our lives have gotten better already. I mean, the time I would take to write a song, and I get the pleasure of creating it that quickly, and have a singer sing better than I could ever sing, but singing what I would want to sing if I had the capabilities of doing it, that's amazing, right? It's like, hey, if I had the talent of the best guitarist, the best singer, all the best musicians, what song would I write? And it gives me like something that would only be a fantasy is now reality. Logos, designs, come up with a logo. I can put a new logo in Gemini and be like, can I see this logo on a t-shirt? Can I? Oh, yeah, it looks a little weird. Can I see it modified this way, that way? And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, yeah, I found a cool logo that I can use for merch, or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, it definitely has made life better. I mean, fixing things, putting it, homework. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff. And if the most precious, priceless thing on earth is time, and it's saving me time, isn't that a important thing? You know what I mean? Like, I always say, like, you can always make more money. You can't make more time. Sometimes I wish I made more money and I didn't listen to my own advice. But, it's, but I never regret, the way I live my life, because it's like, money's never been a motivator of mine, and I think sometimes that, unfortunately, when we have a world where money makes the world go round, some of the most successful people are motivated by money. Obviously, there's always, successful people that aren't. But, I living in a smaller house, having an older car, but I spend my weekends with my kids. I get to I have more free time where, instead of working long hours at a job that's more demanding, that pays more, we have a little family business that sometimes I feel like I stunned its growth, so I can stay flexible and free to coach my kids. I coach them. I coach soccer in the fall and spring. I coach them basketball in the winter. I coach my daughter and my son in basketball. I know all their friends. Their friends, I get to be a part of their lives. And I say this all the time on the show. A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. Like, I never take for granted that I'm having an impact as a mentor and an adult in their lives, and helping hopefully mold them into, adults one day, and hopefully they appreciate the time and effort I put into them. And so to me, like, those things are priceless.
Priceless.
So
there's no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, money to me is like, okay, yeah, even back in the day.
But you have enough. You have a good deal of money too on any kind of reasonable standard. So imagine if. Here's how it might work. This is somewhat optimistic, but it's not totally utopian in a post-labor kind of market. So right now, those guys down at the factory are slugging away, working their butt off to crank out whatever the widgets that they're cranking out. And they've already experienced a lot of automation in their career during our lifetime, but now is like the kind of times 10, right? So in the future years, they're just like, we really don't need you. And as a matter of fact, you're kind of just counterproductive. You're not only not needed, but the only thing you do kind of messes the thing up when you do get involved. So please go home. So the impact of that, though, is that we don't really want you to go home and not spend your money. And so because the money is what drives the whole thing, and we really don't want you to not have money, because then you can't spend the money. So and then our government has gone ahead and invested in Intel, bought some part of that. Our government has this and that. Are you familiar with the sovereign fund of Norway? It's often cited. So Norway discovers all this oil off their coast, and they discover a reasonable amount of oil, and they're a tiny, tiny country population-wise. So they say, okay, well, The money's just piling up there. Let's give a dividend to our people. Same thing happened. I used to live in Alaska just for less than a year. Same thing in Alaska. You live in Alaska, there's a negative income tax. At least there used to be. I haven't checked lately. It was $2,000. So you filed your income tax and it started out with, you get $2,000. So that's your thing. So think of it as a standpoint of a dividend. It's the same way that Trump said, we're collecting all these monies on tariffs. We're going to give everybody a dividend. Well, the reason I go through all that is there's precedent for that. We have a mechanism for how to do that in Norway and Alaska. And it's not unreasonable to think that a big increase in GDP brought about by an unprecedented level of automation and increase in GDP could create wealth that then would, it would be a smart political move to say, okay, you get a $10,000 dividend, given to different people. But yeah, you get a $10,000 dividend. Well, that's not life-changing. You're not going to, completely transform your life, but kind of loosens the shoulders a little bit. Like, yeah, we can go on that vacation this year and stuff like that. I think that's definitely possible without getting into all the dystopian, useless eater kind of stuff. Who wants to do that? Who wants to blow up the whole thing? Just give everybody $10,000 dividend because, we're more productive as a country. We're more productive. We're generating more GDP. We're on the upswing. Here you go.
Yeah, well, that is interesting. I do have to go pick up my kids, but I have a new song that is literally about the topic we're talking about, and you could see by the album artwork, it's something that has influenced. And here's my.
Can you play any of it? Can you play any of it on the air now? Just even at 5-10 seconds.
Good. Yeah, I could. I'm gonna read you some of the lyrics. I think you'll appreciate this as a song or as a fan of music. Humans create, evolve, and take. Correcting our flaws has become a mistake. A sterilizing world without any pain. Man and machine now interchange. A digital disease for the bliss we seek. There is no turning back. We are in too deep. A digital disease making us obsolete. The end of days when man and machine meet. No need to think, connect to the neural link. No need to sleep in the synthetic dream. No need to feel, abandon flesh for steel. No need to hope, this is how we cope. And then the chorus again. And then human or code, forced to comply. At the end, do we restart or die? We search for answers to escape the lies. At the end, do we restart or die? Unplug, reset until the simulation's dead. Unplug, reset. Then it's just the chorus again. But you can see the influence and the theme. I'll send you the song. It should be out everywhere, hopefully soon. I use TuneCore to distribute my music, but yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll if I do I have your number? Maybe I have your number. I'll text it to you. But yeah, I figured it was relevant to what we were talking about. And as you can,
very cool lyrics, man.
It's been yeah. I mean, I get OCD about things. One night my wife's like, dude, what were you doing all night? I'm like, I was like writing the lyrics and I was listening to music and I was writing the lyrics. She's like, it was like 3 a.m. I'm like, yeah, I haven't slept since, and it just, I get so OCD. And then when, again, like you don't know, like for some reason there's certain times, and for me, it's always nighttime where like, I feel like I'm tapping into something, but I also think it's like, it's a leisure time too. Like your best ideas come to you when you're, in between sets at the gym, or on your walk, or when you're taking a shower, when you're kind of away from other distractions. So it could be that, it's like more peaceful at night. But that one, yeah, I mean, I was like working nonstop on those lyrics, and I was like, dude, I'm so close, but there's some lines I need to change and some ideas I want to add to it, but yeah, it's fascinating. It's but we definitely did not scratch even the surface. We've been talking for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'm not sure we even scratched the surface of all the things I want to talk about. I feel like you ever listen to No Agenda with Adam Curry?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been on before. I feel like you and I are the No Agenda guys. Like we'll push back on each other, but we really like each other and we get along. But sometimes it sounds like we don't get along, but we really do get along. So it's funny that their relationship. But it's yeah, I love having conversations with people that are willing to push back and kind of force me to kind of rethink things that maybe I thought I fully thought out. That's the almost one of the funnest things of being alive is like kind of knowing that like everything you rethink and everything you're analyzing hopefully is one step closer to some type of truth or understanding, and that's kind of I guess what we're trying to do. But for Alex, for people listening who want to keep up with your new podcast, any future work, any social media platforms that you're on, let people know how they can keep up with you.
Well, I haven't launched it, but I'm really, really close to launching this research institute that is going to hopefully, help bring this forward. So it was great talking to you and bringing it out there, Ricky. So I appreciate you having me on. And I'd love to connect with you later because I feel like you could really help me in some ways in terms of rethinking who inside, your group that you've connected to might intersect with some of this idea of grounded truth, because I don't want to go on too long. I know you have to pick up your kids, but one of the reasons I think we really resonate is the point you made. I just couldn't emphasize enough. And that's that it's rare to find people that really are that committed to the truth in the way that you're talking about, where when it does directly challenge, kind of core beliefs, they don't pull back, they lean in, they go, ooh, tell me more. Tell me more. How can I gain from letting go of a belief that I thought was who I am? And that I think is just so awesome. It's so rare and unique. And that's why I think I really, really love talking to you. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, same with you. You're definitely one of my favorite guests to have on the show. And I think having experts on in one field is fun, right? It's fun to kind of get somebody who spent their whole life's work on one topic or a handful of topics, but like somebody like you went from things that are typically drastically different from the you have the spiritual perspective, you have this this scientific perspective, you have the entrepreneur business mentality perspective. You understand that world. You also understand the passion project perspective. Typically they're different people. They're not all I just described 4 different people, but they all describe you. So I think having conversation with people that have all these different perspectives, they make for the best conversations because you can shine different lights from different perspectives and see things from different ways, which is probably why you're good at everything you do, is because you can look at it from a perspective that maybe other people in that field aren't looking at it from, because you have these other experiences that help you do that and other interests. So it's it's fascinating. I'm excited to hear your new podcast, and any links that you might want in the show description, send them to me, and I'll make sure to put them there. And I'll definitely have to have you on in the near future. We're going to do a end of the year Union of the Unwanted next Monday, the 22nd. I have a basketball game, so we're going to do it a little later than usual. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time start time. But if you can make it, I'd love to have you on. I think one of the end of the year topics we should be talking about is AI and how 2026, how that's going to, pan out, and what great leaps we're going to make in regards to technology. So I think you'll be a great contributor to that conversation. So I'll send you an invite, and hopefully you can make it. And thanks again, Alex. I really, really appreciate it. I'm glad that you're going to spend some time with the kids. You get to enjoy the holidays, and you're smiling as always, which I love. And I love the energy. So thank you so much, Alex. We'll keep in touch. Thanks.
Great, Ricky. I'll see you on the Union on Monday. It's such an awesome project that you guys do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Hopefully we see you there.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.